Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Sanhedrin. This is our 10th lesson, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 65 to 71. I would like to dedicate our learning in the memory of the Bibas family and to the Zef family here in Alon Shvut. May we only hear good news and share Besorot Tovot together. Okay, Daf 65, we are in the middle of discussing people who worship idolatry. And on Daf 65, we have two types of people. They are called the Ov and the Yidoni. And the Torah speaks about them that what they do is forbidden for us to do. What do they do? So the Mishnah says, Ov, they speak to the dead, and somehow the dead speaks from their armpit, and the Yidoni, they put a bone in their mouth, and again, the dead person speaks from that bone. Both of these people get stoning. Both of the punishment is stoning, and if you ask them to, tell you your future, so then it's just it's called a lav, right? It's just a negative commandment. You don't get skila though. So the Gemara explains that they are very similar, Ov and Yidoni, and therefore if you do both, you only bring one sacrifice. Or maybe they are different. Maybe the Yidoni, there's no actual action, and therefore you do not bring a sin offering if you practice that. Again, the verse separates them for punishment. Or Rabbi Akiva says that even if there is no action, you would still be liable to bring a sacrifice. A blasphemer, right? Someone who curses God, he does bring a sacrifice, and what did he do? He just moved his lips. Therefore, we can learn from here that maybe just moving your lips, right? Speaking is enough to make a person liable to bring a sin offering. Okay, if a person brings a bee and a scorpion together with an incantation, this is prohibited. Again, there's a machloket if moving your lips is seen as an action or not. So we said the Ov, again, someone who practices Ov, speaks between their joints. Again, they speak to the dead, and the Yidoni puts a bone in their mouth, and then they speak. And we actually see this in the Tanakh. Shaul, King Saul, goes to a woman who practices Ov, right? She's called a Ba'alat Ov, a woman who speaks to the dead. And if you remember, Shaul asks this woman to speak to the spirit of Shmuel. And we see that he does speak to Shmuel. So then the question is, right? Maybe there's like different types of this Ov practice. You can speak. You can consult with a skull. That reminds me of like Hamlet, right? And then the spirit comes up head first. Maybe you can do this on Shabbat, or maybe you can't. And there's a story that Rabbi Akiva proved that Shabbat was actually Shabbat because the Baal Ov, the person who spoke to the dead, couldn't raise the spirits on Shabbat. And since he couldn't do it, he proved that it was really Shabbat. And since we're talking about speaking to spirits, the Gemara describes a person who starved himself and slept in a cemetery so that he could talk with the spirits. And Rava actually created a person by studying Sefer HaYetzirah. This reminds us of the story of the golem from Prague, where someone could create something, however, it could not speak. And the rabbis used this Sefer HaYetzirah. Again, the word Sefer HaYetzirah means the book of creation, to create things as well. Now, the Gemara speaks about different practices. So me'onen is a person who creates an illusion, or maybe it's that he tells the future. Menachesh is a person who talks about bad omens, right? If the deer crossed your path, or if the food fell from your mouth. So then, right, all of these bad omens, these practices are forbidden. Daf 66, the Mishnah explains that if you desecrate Shabbat, so then you also get stoned, and if you do something that is liable for karet, and if you did it by accident, you would bring a sin offering. The next Mishnah explains that if you curse your parents in the name of God, you also get stoned. And if you use a nickname of God, you also get stoned, or maybe it's not enough, and you are exempt from stoning. The Gemara explains that when the verse says, right, ish, right, a person, a man, but why does it say it twice? So it comes to include a daughter as well, or someone who is androgynous. They're also liable if they curse their parents. And there's a separate warning not to curse a judge or a leader. And this teaches us that you're not allowed to curse someone in a leadership position, and they're connected to parents as well. The next Mishnah tells us a person who has relations with a girl who is betrothed, a na'ara me'urasa, who is a virgin and still in her father's house. So if a person has relations with her, he also gets stoned. If two men had relations with her, the first one gets stoned, and the second one gets strangled. And the Gemara explains. This is learned from a verse. The rabbis say that you're liable even if she's a minor. Again, the word na'ara, right? She's called a na'ara me'urasa. Na'ara means that she's between the age of 12 and 12 and a half. Here the Gemara adds that even if she's under 12, he would also be liable. And again, then the Gemara says that they're always liable. The question is, what punishment would they get? Would they get stoning, skila, or chenek, which is strangulation? Okay. So the Gemara says that they both get killed. Maybe they both need to be of a certain age. And the Gemara says, no, it says the man shall die. The man needs to be an adult. And the girl, again, we said, is between 12 and 12 and a half. If he didn't actually have relations with her, he is not liable. If 10 men had basically anal relations with her, meaning she's still a virgin, all 10 of them get skila, right? They get stoned because she is still a virgin, or maybe only the first person is liable for skila. If it's a Kohen's daughter, we saw this previously, they actually get srifa, which is burning, as opposed to skila, which is stoning. Okay, Daf 67. The next Mishnah tells us that an instigator, this is a person who convinces another person to do idolatry. So this is a regular person to a regular person, right? What does he do? He says, there's an idol over there. This is what he does. This is how he likes to be worshipped. Now the Mishnah tells us, generally we do not trap a person to get them punished. However, for this person, we do set a trap. What does that mean? So you can say, right, I have some other friends who might be interested in this. Come with me, tell me more about it. And you hide, right? Again, either you trap him in front of two witnesses, or you hide two people in another room, and as soon as they overhear him trying to persuade the person, so then he becomes liable for stoning. The Gemara lists statements that if this instigator says to them, oh, let's go and serve an idol, or let's bow, or let's slaughter, so each one of these things he would be liable for. So now the Gemara explains, right, if a person is a false prophet, right, if he says, right, God told me that we should go and bow down to this idol, so then he gets chenek, he gets strangulation and not skila, because he's using a different mechanism. If he does it to a group of people, he gets chenek, again, he gets strangulation. There's a machloket, maybe he does still get stoning. Again, what does it mean? We trick him, so we take him to a private room, but there are other people in another room, and they overhear him, and then they're able to bring him to court and convict him. The next Mishnah talks about the subverter. This is called the mediach, and this is a person who pressures a group of people to worship idolatry. Also, a sorcerer is liable for stoning, and the Mishnah explains that the sorcerer has to do an act of magic. It cannot just be an illusion, which is very interesting because, right, the question is, do we believe in magic or not? So here it seems to be that he actually has to do magic in order to be liable. The Gemara explains, right, what's a mediach. This leads to ir nidachat. Again, a person who pressures an entire city or group of people to worship an idol. Okay, let's talk about sorcerers. The verse says it's either a man or a woman. The verse mentions machshefa, right? Machshefa is the Hebrew word for a witch, because most of these sorcerers were women, i.e. witches. And these people would get either killed, meaning beheaded, which is called saif, or maybe they get skila, they get stoning. What is these shafim? What is this magic? It's something that contradicts what God says. Or if, right, maybe God wants it to work, and if it works, and it's all from God. Or if God doesn't want it to work, it won't work. There were these sorcerers who used demons to do things. They used a special utensil, and this was also forbidden as well. And then the Gemara actually says, right, if it's a real sorcery, you get stoning. But if it's an illusion, then you do not get stoned. It's still forbidden, but you do not get stoned. And there are some actions that are even permitted. So since we're talking about sorcerers, right, the most famous sorcerers that we know are in Egypt. The Gemara mentions the sorcerers in Egypt, that they couldn't create anything smaller than a barley seed, right? And that's when they say, Etzba Elokim hi, right, with the lice. They say this must be the hand or the finger of God, because it was something that they couldn't do. It was too small. Then the Gemara gives a few stories about sorcerers, right? There's a story of a sorcerer who cut a camel in half and then he put it back together. Maybe it was real, maybe it was fake and it was only an illusion. Another story in Egypt, if they would buy an animal, they always bring it to the water to drink, because maybe it was sorcery. And if they drink from the water, the spell goes away and they can figure out, right? It was the story of someone who bought a donkey, and it turns out really it was a piece of wood, but he didn't know how to to change the magic. And therefore the person was fooled. Speaking of Egypt, right, it talks about the frog in Egypt. If you look at we read it a few weeks ago in the Parsha, that it says that there was one frog, and then it says that it covered the land. So the Gemara explains either the one frog had many babies, or the one frog whistled and all the frogs came and infested all of Egypt. You can write that down if you need a Dvar Torah for your Seder. Okay, Daf 68. Rabbi Akiva and his friends went to visit Rabbi Eliezer when he was sick. And his son wanted to take off his tefillin, but he started yelling at him. And then they thought maybe he had gone crazy, but he didn't. Right? They realized he was in his right mind, and Rabbi Eliezer was put in cherem in the past. Right? He was excommunicated, and therefore they sat 4 amot away from him. But they wanted to learn his Torah, and Rabbi Eliezer said to them that they are not going to die natural deaths, and Rabbi Akiva's will be the worst out of all of them, which is actually true. Rabbi Eliezer realized that even though he had learned a lot of Torah, there was so much more that he had to learn, and that he only taught just, as we say, the tip of the iceberg. And he realized that he was about to die, and he knew about this type of sorcery that you use to plant squash, and he showed Rabbi Akiva how to do it. And then they asked Rabbi Eliezer a question about purity and impurity. And as he was answering, he died, right? And the Gemara says his soul left in purity, and he was no longer excommunicated, and he died on Friday. And Rabbi Akiva didn't fully understand the sorcery, so then Rabbi Yoshua had to teach him the details, and we see that in this case, this was permitted to do, again, maybe it was permitted to teach how to do it, but you're not allowed to actually do it, and then you would be liable if you did. With that, we finish the 7th chapter. And now we are going to begin the chapter of Ben Sorer Umoreh. A Ben Sorer Umoreh, we're going to see in a minute, is a child, we'll see. It's a child who exhibits gluttonous behavior, and he steals and he overeats and overdrinks, and he is brought to court by his parents, and he is stoned because we are concerned that he is going to grow up stealing and maybe even killing people, and therefore we actually basically kill him early before he does more harm. Now, before you get very upset, I'm just going to explain that there is an opinion in the Gemara, we're going to see at the end of today, that this never happened, meaning, yes, the Torah talks about it, but one opinion is because there are so many details that need to be exactly it's very specific. So because of that, there is an opinion that this actually never happened. So before you get upset about killing children on what they might do in the future, just recognize that maybe it didn't even happen. That being said, so the Mishnah says that the Ben Sorer or Moreh, how old is he? So it needs to be that he has reached puberty, where he has 2 pubic hairs, till all the hair grows in, meaning it's a very short period of time where he is an adult, but he's just barely an adult. It says Ben Sorer Umore. Ben means a son and not a daughter, and it is not an ish, not a man. So he can't be an adult, and it can't be a girl, but it also can't be a minor. So the Gemara explains that he gets killed because of what he will end up doing. Maybe we also do this for a minor. The Gemara says no. The verse says, "V'chi yiyeh le'ish ben," right? When the man has a son. So we say that the son needs to be close in age to the man. Therefore, he has to be right an adult, but not an adult. The father definitely needs to be an adult. He cannot be a son who had a son, meaning he cannot be a minor who had a child. So now we're going to have a whole machloket if a minor can even biologically have a child. Now, if you remember, we've discussed this before, that a boy from age 9 and 1 day and up, we say that, I guess, either biologically or halachically, he could have relations, and therefore his relations count. However, the Gemara on Daf 69 tells us, even if he can have relations at age 9, he cannot have children at age 9. As we said, the Ben Sorer Moreh is a son, right, that isn't a father, but it's only 3 months that he's able to be a Ben Sorer Umoreh. That's the window. So this shows actually that a minor can father a child. Or no, right, maybe he got someone pregnant as he reached maturity, right, or puberty, and then she's pregnant, but she hasn't given birth yet, and then he could already be called a father, and that cannot be Ben Sorer Umoreh. And here the Gemara discusses, again, a boy from 9 and 1 day is seen as that having relations works or is technically relations. For a girl, right, we say that it's over 3 years old, not that she can have a child. But if someone has relations with a girl over 3 years old, it is seen as having relations. And the Gemara proves this by, again, going back to our discussion that we had a few weeks ago about people having inappropriate, right, illicit relations with different people, right? So if a father has relations with a girl who's over 3 years old, he is liable. And again, as we said, a boy over 9, relations is valid as well, but under 8, no. And then there's a machloket if an 8-year-old boy could actually have children. And now we're going to get into a very interesting discussion. Again, there are 2 ways to understand the following discussion. Either it's to be taken literally, and if it's to be taken literally, then we have to remember that, in the ancient world, it wasn't like this world, meaning they lived much shorter lives, which means that it seems to be that they matured faster, right? So if we have a midrash that says that Rivka was really 3 years old when she married Yitzchak, right? Was she really 3 years old? Was she not 3 years old? Did 3 years old look different, 3,000 years ago? So now the Gemara tells us that Bathsheba was Bathsheba, who's the mother of King Solomon, of Shlomo. So Bathsheba was the granddaughter of Achitophel, and Shlomo was 7 when his great-grandfather Achitophel died, and Achitophel died at 33. If anybody would like to do the math, he's a great-grandfather, and he is 33 years old. So now the Gemara says, if he's 33 years old and Shlomo is 7, that means that at 26, right, he was 26 when Shlomo was born. That means that there were 3 generations in 26 years. It means that everyone had children at 8 years old, or maybe 9 years old, right? Maybe the boys were 9, and maybe Bathsheba was younger, because again, girls mature faster. So maybe Bathsheba had Shlomo when she was 6 years old. And don't forget that she already had a child before Shlomo. So again, if this troubles you, then maybe it's not meant to be taken literally, or we just don't understand. Another mention of people's ages and how old they were, right? Terach had Abraham and Nahor and Haran. Maybe this was age order. And Sarah is his niece, right? Haran's daughter. But Haran was 8 when he had Sarah. Again, how could that be? Or maybe the order that the children are written is not really age order, but maybe it is the order of their wisdom and not their age. We see this also with the children of Noach, right? Noach has 3 sons, Shem, Cham, and Yafet. And the question is that in age order, Shem being the oldest, Cham, and then Yafet, and they're a year apart? The Gemara says no, right? That is not the age order. How do we know this? Because Shem was 100 after the flood, and therefore he could not have been the oldest son, but he was the smartest. So here it's the order of intelligence. Yafet was actually the oldest son. And for our Parsha, if you're looking for another Dvar Torah for this week's Parsha, the Gemara on the bottom of 69, it tells us that, tells us that Bitzalel built the Mishkan. Now, Bitzalel was the great-grandson of Kalev. Now, Kalev is 40 when they went to go spy, and therefore, if he was 40, it must be that he was 26 when he had already 3, when he was a grandfather, and he had 3 generations, and it shows that in the time of the Tanakh, people were having children at the age of 8. Okay, Daf 70, the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah tells us that the son is liable only after he eats a huge amount of meat and drinks a lot of wine. Again, this is a sign of gluttony. And there's a machloket how much of each thing he needs to eat. If he ate it at a seudat mitzvah, right, at a wedding, at a bar mitzvah, or he ate it at the meal after they made it a leap year, or he ate from maaser sheni money, or he ate from forbidden foods, or he ate food that's a mitzvah or a sin, or he ate everything, but he didn't eat specifically meat or wine. All of these things, if he did it this way, he is not liable. So again, it has to be something very, very specific. So now the Gemara explains that what's the case, right? He buys the food cheaply. This shows that he will probably continue to do so. And he One opinion is that he eats the meat raw and he drinks the wine, which is undiluted, or no, even if it's partially diluted wine and partially cooked meat, he is still liable. Maybe if he eats salted meat or wine that has not yet fermented, then he is not liable. And the Gemara says the first 3 days that you crush grapes, that is not considered wine, right? What we would call grape juice. That is not considered wine. And therefore, if he drinks that, he is not liable for to be put to death. Since we're talking about wine, and this is very good because it's almost Rosh Chodesh Adar. Wow, so many divrei Torah. So, the Gemara, since we're talking about wine, the Gemara tells us that wine was only created to console mourners and to reward evil people. And now we're talking about consuming wine. So if you're careful with your wine consumption, then you will be a leader, a rosh, right? The Gemara is discussing the fact that grape juice is called tirosh, right? It's literally called tirosh in Israel. So why is it called tirosh? So if you drink responsibly, you will become the rosh, right? So the leader. And if not, you will become rash. Rash means poor, right? So you can use wine for good or for bad. When the Torah speaks about wine, there are 13 vavs in the discussion, or maybe woes with wine, and we see, right, what's the most famous story of wine being problematic, right? We have the story of Noah, right, who after the flood, he drinks wine and it leads to bad things. Again, the Gemara asks what happens to Noah, right? Either he was castrated or he was sodomized, or maybe both, and therefore he curses his son. Back to wine, another great midrash. The Gemara says that the tree that Adam and Chava ate from, right, the Eitz Hada'at, the tree of knowledge, was really a grapevine, right? Just so you should know, there are many opinions as to what it is. Not one of them says apple, which is very interesting because basically in every Christian painting, the tree, right, Eve is giving Adam an apple. The Gemara has many different opinions, but here the opinion is that it was actually grape juice, right? Or she gives him grapes, right? And this causes people misfortune, or maybe it was wheat, because a child, right, doesn't have da'at, doesn't have knowledge till he can eat grain, right, what we would call probably solids. Or maybe it was a fig tree, because the next thing that they do is they cover themselves with fig leaves. Where'd they get fig leaves from? Maybe the tree of knowledge was actually a fig tree. Okay. Since we were talking about Shlomo, right, King Solomon, so Shlomo's mother taught him a very important lesson, right? She admonished him. She said, you are taking all the characteristics that I worked very hard for you to get, and you're using them for sin, right? She said, I prayed to have a son who was fair and filled with Torah and fit for prophecy, right? And what are you doing? You are turning to kings who drink, and you say who needs God, and you think that you know everything, you do know everything, and therefore you don't need to drink. It's actually inappropriate. And Shlomo went and agreed with his mother, and that's the end of that. Okay, back to Ben Sorer Umoreh. We said he's only liable if he eats with a group of not good people, and we said if he's involved in a mitzvah, he is not liable. We said that that if it's a meal that they did after they would make it a leap year, so they would have this meal of bread and beans, and if he brings meat and wine, so then, right, still, right, because you're involved in a mitzvah, he would still not be liable for this. Maybe it has to be not less than 10 people. The meal at night, after they made it a leap year, they do it at night, but it starts during the day. Again, we said it can't be that it was Maser Sheni. Again, if he's using it in the normal way, he would not be liable. If he ate chicken, he would not be liable. If again, food given to comfort mourners, this is food that is a mitzvah, and if he ate on a fast day, this is forbidden food, and either way, he would not be liable. If he ate pressed figs, even though it could get you drunk, it does not count. Also, if he drank honey or milk, even though it also gets you a little bit drunk, it does not count. Okay, Daf 71, the next Mishnah. So what's the case? It has to be a boy who stole, if it's a boy who stole from his father and then ate in his father's domain, or he stole from other people and ate in those other people's domains, he would not be liable. He's only liable if he steals from his father, because the Gemara is going to explain that it's much easier to steal from your parents, right? Their parents are sleeping, you sneak into the wallet, you take out a few dollars, right? It's much easier to steal from your parents. So it has to be that he steals from the father and he eats in someone else's domain to show that he's not embarrassed, right? He's gluttonous in front of a lot of other people. Another opinion is he has to steal from his mother as well, right? His father and his mother. So now the Gemara explains that if he eats in his father's domain, it shows that he's actually afraid of being caught. And the Ben Sorero More, right, is someone who's going to do it again, right? Our concern is this is going to be his behavior for the rest of his life. And therefore, we're going to construct a case where it's clear that he's going to do it again. Okay, next Mishnah. The father, let's say the father wants to bring him to court, but the mother doesn't, or vice versa. He is not liable till both his parents want to bring him to court. If his mother isn't fit for her father, meaning halachically according to Jewish law, so again, he is not liable. The Gemara explains that the mother needs to be equal to the father, right? So what does that mean, equal? Equal in status, meaning both Jewish, or the Gemara explains maybe it has to be that their voices are similar and they have similar appearances. And because of this statement, the Gemara now says there has never been a ben sorer umoreh, meaning there's no way to construct this case where all of these qualifications, all align. And why was it written in the Torah? To give us reward for those who learn about it, but not because it actually existed. And since we're talking about things that maybe didn't exist, the same thing with an Ir Nidachat. We learned an Ir Nidachat is a city where they all did idolatry and they all get killed and you burn everything in the city. So the Gemara actually says that an Ir Nidachat actually never existed. Again, it's too hard, and it's too hard for it to ever exist, and therefore maybe it didn't exist. The Gemara says, or maybe it did, right? We're not sure. Another thing that might not have ever existed is a house with tzara'at that needed to be destroyed. Again, there are very clear distinctions. So maybe it was too hard for it to ever really be real, or maybe it did exist. Next Mishnah, if let's say one parent is, okay, so this Mishnah is going to be based on the verse that teaches Ben Sorer Umoreh. And basically the verse says, right, that the parents have to bring him to court and they have to hear what he says and they have to say what he did. Anyway, because of all of those words, the Mishnah says that if one of the parents is missing a hand, right, so then it's not, he's not going to be liable because they can't bring him to court. If they're blind, right, because they can't see. If they're deaf mute, it means that they can't speak. All of these things, because it's based on the verse, he is not a ben sorer umoreh if these are his parents. They need to warn him in front of 3 people, and then he gets lashes. And if he does it again, they bring him to a court of 23 people, and they can't kill him until the first 3 people that had originally warned him, they need to be part of those 23 judges. And if they are, so then they can kill him. The Gemara says, wait a minute, but why does he have to be warned in front of 3 people? He should be warned in front of 2 people, right? 2 people are witnesses. So we say, you're right. He's warned in front of 2 people, but then he gets lashes in front of 3 judges. And then, right, it says, Baninu zeh, right, this is the child. It teaches that the original 3 judges need to be part of the 23 judges that are going to sentence him to stoning. Last Mishnah for today, if the boy ran away, and then you only caught him after he developed full signs of puberty. Remember, we said we have a very short window of time. So then you cannot punish him as a ben sorer umoreh. If he ran away after the verdict, and then he, developed, he is still liable because he was already sentenced while he was in that in-between stage. So the Gemara says that it brings something a little bit differently. If a non-Jew curses God and then he converts, so then he's exempt because he's now seen as a different person. And we say this is learned from our Mishnah, that if there is a status change in the middle between, right, during the court case and sentencing, so then the person would not be liable when there's a status change. If a non-Jew killed a Jew and then he converted, he is still liable for punishment because in this case, the punishment doesn't change whether he's a Jew or a non-Jew. Therefore, he's still liable because even though his status changed, the punishment did not change. And therefore, he would still be punished. Okay. With that, wow, we finished early. That's very exciting. With that, we have a few minutes if people have any questions. There was a lot here. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Yes, Aliza.
It's not a question, it's a statement. You say many, many brilliant things. Give you that. But today you said one that stands out. You said, or maybe we just don't understand it yet. And I hesitate. Remember, I said I hesitate to bring this up. But all of the concepts about he lived a day, he lived a million years, we don't understand the time. And I'm not going to get into the science of the earth changing so much. I won't. But, you think a mother's going to stand around if she has and watch a 3-year-old have relations with anybody?
Again,
we don't understand it.
I agree with you 100%. We do have to understand that even 100 years ago, girls were getting married much younger. Obviously not at 3, but 12, 13, 14.
I
whereas,
agree with you. I agree
right.
with you.
So I'm again, as I said, I think we don't understand, and I think that times have changed. I think 3 is still 3, but I do agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, to be either taken literally or not taken literally. We could just say very young, very young. Yes. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, I just had a quick thought. Might be completely incorrect just in what we just discussed. We're reminded, again, well, we really don't understand, and we don't really understand even how to hear and read the Talmud, but they are discussing very fine points of law, and this is all they care about, is how they should accurately define what is applicable to the death sentence, what kind of death, these sorts of things, and they are coming up with what we know can be exaggerated. We've seen it other places, very exaggerated situations just for the debate, to tease something out. And I know I'm often completely lost because I do not have the background to really understand the context. And but then none of us really are anymore, so that's why they've got all these commentaries and other ways of giving people access to try to read some of this, because we are so detached from what might have been understood in the one-to-one work that would have gone on from the master to the student in ancient times.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you.
Beautiful, Ilanit. Yes.
Mm-hmm. That actually helps. Thanks.
Okay. So, wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom, a Chodesh Tov. It's Rosh Chodesh Adar this Friday and Shabbat. So, as we have learned in Masechet Megillah, Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. As we enter Adar, may we only hear good news and share in joy and positive things. And may the mourners of Israel find comfort. So wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.